meeting is called to order. Southampton Town Planning Board, Thursday, February 22nd, 2018. The Secretary will call the roll.
Chairman Finnerty.
Present.
Vice Chair Blaney.
Present.
The Secretary is present. Board Member Zuccarelli.
Present.
Board Member Long.
Present.
Board Member Burke.
Present.
Board Member Lofaro is absent. Sir, we have a quorum.
Could we please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome to the public hearing portion of the agenda. Before we get started, I request that you place any phones. I used to say pagers, but I don't think they exist anymore. Please play. Something's wrong with the PA? It's too much echo? What if I speak loud, Fred? Like this?
I think you get it.
I think I'll avoid the mic. Try to keep my voice projecting. Please put cell phones in silent mode and also take note of the emergency exits in this room. We are going to read the notice into the record. If you wish to address the board, please use the sign-in sheet that's provided by the front desk. Your name will be called. It's the intent of the board to adjourn at 9 p.m. Better? If any names that have not been, I believe we'll be able to get through all the speakers tonight. I was going to say if there's an overrun, we'll bring them back for a future hearing. But I think we'll be able to get everyone into the record tonight. There's a 3-minute time limit on comments. The one thing we do ask regarding decorum is we do not permit public displays of support or opposition. There's no applause, there's no booing, there's no cheering, signs. Speakers should be given the opportunity to speak without worrying that there might be contrary opinion in the public. So we ask that you adhere to that protocol. We're going to read the notice into the record, and then we'll have introductory comments by the applicant's representative. And we will also allow an equal amount of time if there's a party or speaker who wishes to be heard, perhaps to comment on the application. We'll give that person an equal amount of time. If the applicant takes 15 minutes or so, or 12 minutes, we'll afford that next speaker the same amount of time. And then we'll go to the 3-minute time limit. Okay, that being said, we will read the record, notice into the record.
Notice of public hearing. Please take notice that in accordance with the Town Code of the Town of Southampton, a public hearing will be held by the Southampton Town Planning Board on Thursday, February 22nd, 2018 at 6 p.m. prevailing time at the Southampton Town Hall at 116 Hampton Road, Southampton, New York, to consider the pre-application entitled Lewis Road PRD. The application consists of 2 planned residential development, PRD or cluster, alternatives consisting of a 137-lot PRD plan, 70 village lots, 23 village estates, 31 woodland estates, and 13 workforce housing units, a variety of amenities for the residents: pool, event lawn, clubhouse, putting lawn, sports courts, sports fields, farm-to-table garden and greenhouse, kids forest club, and 65% open space equaling 390 acres, and a 118-lot PRD plan including 10 clubhouse units, 13 village cottages, 53 village lots, 16 village estates, and 26 woodland estates, a variety of amenities for the residents including an 18-hole golf course, and 65% open space equaling 390 acres on a total of 178 assembled tax parcels totaling 591 acres of land situated in the CR 200 zoning district, comparable growth area of the Central Pine Barrens Overlay District and Aquifer Protection Overlay District located at Lewis Road and Spinney Road, East Quogue, Town of Southampton, Suffolk County Tax Map numbers 900-2503-1 with additional surrounding tax lots. By order of the Planning Board of the Town of Southampton, Philip Keith, Secretary.
Very good.
Good evening, board members. Wayne Bruin, O'Shea, Marcinsick and Bruin for the applicant, DLV Quogue. Tonight we're here for the subdivision pre-application before the board. It's the first step, as this board is well aware. It's more or less the conceptual step where this board will provide us with a report and guidance as to the variety of issues that may arise by either your staff, advisory agencies, members of the public, or otherwise. Before we go on any further, it's our plan for me to make a brief statement, and then Chick Voorhees will help describe the proposals that are in front of you tonight, and then we'll answer any questions the board may have and let you hear the public speak. As to, I just want to let you know our clients, the representatives of our clients are here tonight. I'm not going to get into the details, but we also have pretty much all of our consultant team that is involved in the preparation of this application, as well as the environmental impact statement, which you know you're aware of, that is part and parcel of this application. Before we go any further, I'd like to hand up my written comments for you to incorporate into the record. Also, I need to remind you that we did submit an affidavit of posting and mailing, which I believe your council has looked at to gain jurisdiction for this hearing. As the board knows, this is an application that has a long history, particular a history that started with this board back in 2005. Shortly after that application was submitted, the town imposed a moratorium, and after 2.5 years of study, the town produced what is known as the East Quogue Land Use Plan and generic EIS. The basis for that plan was to understand generally the impact on the East Quogue School District because of the status of the East Quogue School District being at capacity at that time, and the East Quogue was pretty much concerned about the impact of any future development, particularly in the areas north of the railroad tracks going forward, and the potential impacts on the school district. As you know, that study was produced and adopted by the town board, and it becomes the basis for the application that you see before you today. That application, however, the comprehensive planning documents that support this, and as you all know, your planning has to be in accordance with the comprehensive plan, and the document I submitted to you tonight gives you an outline of the comprehensive planning documents that guide you and us in developing this property, going back as far as the 1970 master plan. This application, in that study on the East Quogue Land Use Plan, actually recommended, instead of the normal customary planned residential development cluster subdivision that this board sees day in and day out, they would prefer to see some sort of resort development with a golf course as its key amenity to assure there was no generation of school-age children. The study actually recommended that the town board be involved and use the planned development district tool as the process to achieve that. And as you know, my clients made that application. There was actually a final application and a draft environmental impact statement and a final environmental impact statement, which this board, through coordinated review, participated in that. You also know that there was a final environmental impact statement and a findings statement adopted by the town board. However, as we all know, there was a denial based on the fact that the town board failed to get the requisite number of votes. And so, given that, there's no other alternative, has been expressed all along. The only alternative for our client now is to proceed with this board for the development of the project. As I mentioned, we're here for pre-application. Part of the pre-application, we submitted yield plans, which yield plans have been, as I've stated on the record before, reviewed by this board and your staff consistently since 2005. Nonetheless, they are there. You'll see that the yield complies to all your standards. We've also provided 2 alternative cluster plans, which your pre-application requirements require us to do. And those 2 plans are posted here, and I'm sure you have copies in your files before you. One plan is a 137-unit PRD, and the other is a 118-unit PRD. Both plans include accessory recreational areas, as this board consistently has approved in the past. The difference between the plans, the 137 actually is a plan that includes workforce housing as part of its actual component. That's where the numbers, the yield, jumps from the 118. Both of these plans were included and evaluated in the FEIS that this board participated in. The plans, obviously, we're here to hear your comments on the design and layout of those plans and determine further questions on impacts. The 118-unit PRD includes, as one of these accessory recreational amenities, an 18-hole golf course. And you might say, what is the difference between this and the application that was before the town board? Well, the significant difference, as you know, when this board has approved, and we provided documentation in the record as to when and where and how you approved applications for accessory recreational uses in subdivisions, albeit none of them had golf courses because, frankly, the size of the project, the size of the property didn't warrant it, but you have approved tennis courts, golf courses, active recreational aspects on several applications. I mentioned them in our pre-application, and I will be providing you with documentation on each of those cases from your records in the future before you have to act on the pre-application report. However, the application before you, the golf course, so the difference is in all those instances, this board has the authority to approve accessory recreational uses. They have to be for the residents or the owners of the lots in the subdivision only. Can't be something that's generally open to the public. And that's the major difference in this application and what was before the town board. We have now a golf course that is only available to the 118 owners of the lots. It's not going to have an open membership to the general public for those who can afford, let alone be admitted to membership. So that's a significant difference. It's also significant in the environmental review in a number of ways, traffic and other aspects of people that are coming from off-site to use the facility as opposed to just the 118 owners and their invitees. What I'd like to do at this point, without getting into details, is introduce Chick Voorhees, who's been our project manager, not only with the subdivision designs, but the entire environmental review. He'll try to give you an overview, and then if you have any questions, I'm available, but I'll let Chick take over.
Thank you, Wayne. Good evening, members of the board. As Wayne said, my name is Chick Voorhees. I'm with Nelson, Pope & Voorhees. Our offices are in Melville. And just real quick background, I'm a certified environmental planner, certified environmental professional, and I have about 40 years of experience coming in front of this board and many other boards across Long Island and the tri-state area. As Wayne said, the project before you is the Lewis Road PRD, and that's distinguished from the prior PDD by the fact that we're in front of this board. The property is 591 acres in total. It is zoned CR 200, and the owner is seeking to comply with all of the provisions of the CR 200 zoning district for a clustered PRD subdivision. There is no proposed increase in density other than what is allowed under the CR 200 and the other applicable laws of the town. As you know, I believe you know from quite a few years of review, the site is generally north and east of Lewis Road, which is shown here, and straddles Sunrise Highway, which is shown here. North is up on this plan, and it consists of three basic properties. The first one being the Hills property, which we call this Hills South and Hills North. The south part is about 341 acres. The north part here is about 86.92 acres. The Cracky property is to the west. That was pulled together as part of this assemblage of properties. That is 61.26 acres. And the Parlato property to the east is also part of this, and that's 102 acres. So the total's 591 acres, and this is consistent with the size of the property that's been described for other applications in the past. Wayne mentioned the yield maps. I did want to say that yield maps were included in the EIS process before the town board. They have been reviewed by planning staff over a period of time, and the base yield of the property based on CR 200 zoning is 118 lots, conforming with the yield requirements of the town of Southampton. And those prior maps were updated based on a very detailed review by planning staff to include recharge basins and all of the applicable requirements in terms of road right-of-ways that are required as part of a yield map. So the owner of the property is seeking to develop a high-quality, environmentally sensitive residential development based on the seeker studies that have been completed to date and in conformance with the town's comprehensive plan, which Wayne mentioned, and his handout goes into great detail. The PRD is designed to meet all of the environmental and regulatory requirements of CR 200, but also the town's open space chapter 247, the subdivision regulations under chapter 292, the Aquifer Protection Overlay District requirements in chapter 330, as well as the chapter 330 portion which deals with the Central Pine Barrens Overlay District. As you know, and the staff is certainly aware, the site and alternative developments were extensively studied through the seeker process before the town board. And this board participated in that process, as Wayne said. The complete seeker assessment originally done was for a mixed-use PDD, and it completed a draft EIS, final EIS, and a statement of findings. That finding statement was adopted by the town board, and it did conclude that the proposed PDD had the least environmental impact of all the alternatives studied. So this Lewis Road PRD is designed to substantially conform to the design that was ultimately found to have the least impact through the environmental review process for the PDD. So the planning board, we believe, you should be using this complete body of information in review of the proposed subdivision, and then issue your own statement of findings based on that information and the specific review of this project. That will be the next step after the pre-application process. That'll be after a preliminary subdivision is filed. Now, I'll be addressing the plan on the left primarily. I'll speak briefly to the plan on the right that Wayne introduced before, but the plan on the left, which is the 118 unit with golf on-site recreation, is the applicant's preferred plan. That plan includes a variety of lot sizes and unit types totaling 118 units. It also includes a community clubhouse and recreational facilities. Like other subdivisions in Southampton, the subdivision contains recreational amenities for the residents. In this case, the owner proposes the 18-hole golf course that Wayne mentioned as a recreational use for exclusive use by the residents and invitees. And these are common landscape elements in the town, and council has submitted documentation to that effect. Also, this project will conform to the development model of the Discovery Land Company, and I think that's an important aspect. The golf clubhouse will only be open from April through October of each year, which is when the residential units are expected to be occupied. As a result, no full-time residents are expected. It's important to note that the East Quogue GEIS recommended a golf course for the site. And you can see that there's a specific area in the plan that has those recommendations. It should also be noted that the town has 2 golf courses currently that you're very well familiar with, Golf at the Bridge and Sabonic, that were built and have operated under a strict plan, including monitoring and reporting that has now been consistent over time and shown not to have an adverse environmental impact. The Lewis Road PRD will deploy the mitigation and operational requirements already successfully applied to these 2 golf courses. And the applicant proposes to implement all of the on-site mitigation measures that were offered in the FEIS for the Hills PDD as they relate to construction and maintenance of the golf course, and that would include lined greens, a cap or limit on the use of fertilizer, a detailed integrated turf health management plan, which is part of the record, and a special fertigation and denitrification program which will clean up existing groundwater conditions due to nearby agricultural activities in the areas up gradient or to the north and west of the site. And all of that was part of the environmental analysis included in the EIS record. In accordance with town planning recommendations, the proposed design concept clusters and concentrates the residential development in the central portion of the property and in other areas that have been disturbed by decades of prior use. And you know the property, it has extensive exposed barren sand. There were areas where excavation had occurred in the northern part of the property, and there's extensive use of the property by all-terrain vehicles and other encroachments that have occurred over the years. That being said, the site will include the required minimum 65% open space set aside, as well as additional permanently preserved open space on the lots, such that 72% of the natural area of the property will be preserved. The final plan includes 390 acres of preserved open space, which is that 65%, 45 acres that will remain undisturbed within the lots, that gets us up to the 72%, plus 97 acres of amenity area, including golf, and 59 acres of developed areas, which includes 19.2 acres for roads and drainage. Vehicle access will be from Lewis Road, as shown on the plan, and that is in an area that is north and west of Spinney Road. The interior roads for the community will be privately owned and managed and maintained by an HOA, which will be responsible for all landscape and amenity maintenance. Emergency access only will be provided at the north end of Spinney Road. I think that's a practical consideration. But in addition to that, all of the units will be sprinklered in conformance with Fire Code of New York State. The drainage system will comply with all of the applicable town and state requirements for design standards, and we have met with the town engineer and are ready to move forward with the preliminary subdivision based on our understanding from that meeting. And this system will be subject to town review and approval. It will include leaching pools, drainage detention, swales, drainage ponds, as necessary to meet any SWIP requirements and drainage requirements of the town. Groundwater quality will be protected by the low density of development. The property was rezoned under the East Quogue Land Use Plan, and a limitation on the turfed area, as well as the 15% limit on turfed vegetation or fertilized vegetation that is required under Pine Barrens and the Aquifer Protection Overlay District. And the concentration of nitrogen in recharge will be well below the 2.5 milligrams per liter that is the most stringent requirement in the Pine Barrens Comprehensive Land Use Plan. Also, this concentration of nitrogen, as well as the nitrogen load, is the lowest of all of the alternatives that had to do with residential subdivision of the property based on the environmental impact statement analysis. The applicant will also pay, our calculation at this time is $2.66 million to the town's Affordable Housing Trust Fund as per the Long Island Workforce Housing Act. That calculation will be verified through the subdivision process. That is our assessment at this time. You need to understand that the PRD is not subject to incentive zoning, as was proposed under the PDD. This would have required off-site public benefits, which are no longer required because we're not seeking any zoning incentives, no increase in density. And then just a few more points. The density in the project can be increased through affordable housing or provision of additional units under the workforce housing provisions. And the EIS process found that that maximum yield was 137 lots. And that is embodied in the statement of findings that were adopted by the town board. That's what gives rise to the 137 unit plan on the right. So while this alternative is consistent with current zoning and was assessed in the EIS, the applicant does not wish to pursue this alternative and is more in favor of the proposed 118 seasonal dwellings with an on-site golf recreational amenity for use by the residents. The owner is sincere in completing an as-of-right development with the least environmental impact through conformance with the design and operational factors identified in the DEIS, FEIS, and findings completed by the town. We look forward to completing the pre-application process to move forward toward a preliminary subdivision for the most environmentally sound development of the site. I thank you for the opportunity to speak with you and be here if there are any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Myers. I just want to clarify briefly, it maybe needs to be stated for the record, does this project, are you requesting any variances, any special zoning considerations, anything that is not otherwise as of right?
No.
No variances, no change of zone?
No. Everything, in our opinion, is consistent with your requirements. To the extent the design and layout of the PRD, obviously you're modifying lot sizes to, instead of 5-acre lots down to smaller lots. We do have some preliminary questions on perhaps width of roads in certain areas, which you have the ability to modify as you find necessary, but all of that can be addressed and comply to whatever requirements that are required under the subdivision regulations as well as zoning. The issue, as we've indicated, the accessory use, we believe that is a permitted use. This board has approved it. The only thing you haven't approved is an accessory recreational use as a golf course. The town has submitted to the record at least 35 to 40 instances where this town has allowed individual landowners. Most notably, this board reviewed the subdivision application for Cow Neck. And if you're out there in the recreational area, there is a golf course. The Gordon property in Bridgehampton, known as Three Ponds Farm, a golf course. And it's basically on a residential piece of property. It's considered an accessory residential use and thus is in compliance with your zoning. We're not asking for anything different. I would suspect the issue here is if you've allowed tennis courts, swimming pools, and other recreational amenities in various subdivisions. This is merely the magnitude of size and the size of those activities. I can tell you my experience throughout the years, there's been inquiries to that extent, but the problem always was the size of the property. You don't have any parcels of this size and magnitude where you can do what you're trying to achieve under the code. In other words, the first instance, 65% open space. You have 65% open space in these alternatives. The golf course is above and beyond that. It's in that balance, that 35%. I want to make that clear. So that 35%, which we're allowed to develop and clear, the lots are in there, the roads, the drainage, and all the recreational amenities are all within that 35%. So you are getting your 65% open space on this project. So I hope that answers your question.
Further questions?
Relative to the open space, is it still your intention to keep all of the property north of Sunrise Highway as is?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, as you know, that's, the areas north of the Sunrise are in the core preservation area, so they couldn't be developed. I guess the second question to that is the intended ownership or disposition, that they are to be open space. Our client hasn't figured out entirely all the various open space. Obviously, a good portion will remain in the homeowners association that will be accompanying this, subject to whatever necessary conservation easements, which you typically would do. But I suspect the area north of the Sunrise, and my client is considering actually a dedication to the town, which would be consistent with what you've done with other subdivisions in that area.
One more. Without getting into too much detail at this point, can you tell us that the net result of what you would like to do in terms of water quality throughout the project would end up having no effect, or maybe even a net positive effect on water quality? Or what's your take on that?
Well, first I'll let our scientists answer that, but I believe, never mind. I'll let you.
Yes, we would expect during the preliminary subdivision process to submit detailed environmental analysis documents to demonstrate that this proposed project will have no less environmental protection than what was assessed in the PDD EIS process. I have done preliminary nitrogen budget analyses based on our proposed 118-unit plan, and we're finding that the concentration of nitrogen in recharge is extremely low, in the order of about 0.3 milligrams per liter, and that with the use of withdrawal from the aquifer of existing enriched nitrogen-containing groundwater from the farm fields up gradient and reusing that for irrigation on the golf course, based on all of the information that came out of the EIS process that also included reviews by Dr. Martin Petrovic, that we expect a net negative nitrogen load to groundwater. It's not as significant as it was under the original PDD, but in terms of on-site and what is within the boundaries of control of this board, we expect it will be net negative based on our proposed project, and will certainly meet Pine Barrens. So I said it before in my testimony, we are sincere in looking for the most environmentally sensitive project. The ownership is here tonight to hear the nature of comments, but our charge as an environmental consulting team is still to have this be a model project that is environmentally sensitive and will have a net benefit.
Thank you.
I have a follow-up to that. Are you planning for the housing part of it and the golf course amenities to have a combined sewage treatment system for the residents?
At this time, we haven't gotten that far into design. I can tell you that my preliminary calculations are based on use of conventional sanitary systems. This is significantly below the requirements under Article 6, and the development portions are not within priority zones for discharge to surface water bodies. So we are basically conforming with what is required under the law. It is certainly something that is for discussion as we go through the preliminary subdivision. At this time, we are not proposing treatment. And quite honestly, from a nitrogen load standpoint, that is a very small component of the actual nitrogen load on this property. The fertilized areas and other sources are a more significant factor. So, we'll demonstrate that through analysis, but that's the answer at this time.
Question as to the workforce housing. Question as to the workforce housing. If you go to the 137 for the workforce housing, how would that affect the water quality statistics you've given and the open space?
The open space would be the same. Our review of the code is that we need to retain 72% of the existing natural vegetation of the property as as open space. Wayne mentioned 65% before and indicated that the development fits within the remaining 35%. That's true, but the actual development actually fits within the 28%. So that will not change. We find that that's the law. That's the application of the Aquifer Protection Overlay District and the Central Pine Barrens Overlay District. In terms of, sorry, I lost my train of thought. The affordable housing. We can certainly submit those analyses, but I can tell you that it's going to have a greater impact. First of all, we're not building a golf course recreational amenity that would utilize the fertigation that will withdraw nitrogen from the aquifer and recycle that through the turf. And it's a higher density, so that, difference from 118 units to 137 units increases the nitrogen load. So clearly that's a project that would have a greater impact on groundwater.
Well, let's talk about traffic for a second. Obviously, you did some traffic analysis for the previous iteration. What is your, again, without getting into too much of the weeds right now, but what is your thinking on the traffic study that may be required and the traffic analysis at this stage?
We prepared a detailed traffic impact study for the PDD. Keep in mind that did have 118 units, but it also had 132 outside golf memberships. When we added that to the project and the employees and so forth that were necessary to support that facility, the trip generation for the PDD was 62 trips in the AM peak hour, 103 trips in the PM peak hour, and 125 trips on Saturday during the peak hour. The proposed PRD that's before you, without the golf memberships, just based on residential occupancy, the trip generation in the AM peak goes from 62 down to 19 trips. PM peak, the trip generation goes from 103 trips down to 31 trips, and on Saturday it goes from 125 trips down to 42 trips. So this project will have much less of an impact on the area roadways as compared with the PDD that was studied, and by the way, that in itself was found to not have a significant adverse impact on traffic operations.
Thank you.
Further questions? Thank you, Mr. Voorhees. At this time, we are going to allow a representative or a member of the community to enter comments. Mr. Amper, I see you're in position, so I'm going to afford you that opportunity. Good to see you. Sir. It's been a long time. Yep.
My name is Richard Amper. I'm Executive Director of the Long Island Pine Barrens Society. We're an environmental education and advocacy group. As actress Heather O'Rourke said in the movie Poltergeist 2, if you remember it, they're back. That would be the would-be developers of the Defeated Hills project, seeking a mega resort development in the Pine Barrens of Southampton, in a state-designated special groundwater protection area and a critical environmental area. Now, they don't call it the Hills anymore, but one of these so-called new projects looks a lot like the former PDD application without community benefits and other advantages to Southampton. So Southampton's getting less, and they're asking for more. The other new project looks a lot like the discredited As of Right project that Arizona-based Discovery Land used in countless mailers and newspaper ads and said was terrible compared to the Hills. I've supplied you with a copy of the ad. They just put the PDD project beside the As of Right and said the As of Right was terrible. Now they want you to adopt the As of Right. So now the applicant is seeking the town's approval for that project or a more dense development using the town's planned residential development statute instead of the planned development district statute, which has been terminated because of its terrible history. It didn't work. It was not advantageous to the town. So what's most important of all, I think, is the bottom line. You don't have to debate whether or not to approve the Son of the Hills proposal because it doesn't conform to the planned residential development statute. The planned residential development was intended to make the project more environmentally responsible, not less. The applicant can't add a golf course as an accessory use. It's more of a second primary use of the property. To approve the Discovery Land project would be against the PRD law. It would also overturn the Towns Board decision on the hills. And I must say, if this was something they could have done with the PRD, I don't know why they spent 3 years and all the money they spent trying to get it through on the PDD. Southampton has been put through hell with respect to a mega development in the Pine Barrens, in that SGPA in the critical environmental area. Its promoter has rejected a proposed reduced impact alternative advanced conscientiously by environmental and civic groups. It's past time for Discovery Land to admit defeat, to sell the property to the town's Community Preservation Fund or accept the reduced impact alternative. That's what the State Environmental Quality of Review Act requires. Of course, that would require the developer to choose the most environmental project rather than the least, something we're not staying up late at night waiting for. I don't care how much more money Discovery Land is willing to plow into this ill-considered project. It's been rejected by the Town Board, and the Planning Board has no legal basis for granting a development for the Son of the Hills by any other name. So, you don't have the tough decision the Town Board had to make and made because the law doesn't permit you to do it. You couldn't give it to them if you wanted to. Enough said. Send Discovery Land back to Arizona.
At this time, thank you, Mr. Anthony. At this time, I just want to clarify the prior application to the Town Board. The Town Board has full discretion, had full discretion in their decision-making process. Our board, we hear your voices primarily through the code and the associated planning documents that go with the code. We have to follow the dictates of the code, and this board does not have the discretion to approve or accept projects based on general community support or opposition. We pretty much have to go where the science and the planning and the regulations direct us. The Town Board was not constrained in that manner. This board is. I know there's a sense that if some sort of campaign is mounted with letters and speakers and petitions, that somehow they can sway this board in the same manner that the Town Board was. And I want to dispel that myth. We have significantly higher constraints in our decision making. That being said, we do afford people the chance to speak. There's a 3-minute time limit. I always tell people, with the exception of 7 words, you can say whatever you want into the mic. Please adhere to the time limit. We have a timekeeper, and he may look mellow, but he's pretty strict. He's going to give you a 30-second warning, and then we're going to go to the next speaker, because we want to get all the comments in tonight that we can. Thank you for maintaining decorum, and we'll bring up our next speaker. Do we have the name?
It's Kevin McAllister.
Very good. Welcome, Kevin.
Good evening, members of the board. I'm Kevin McAllister of Defend H2O. I'm a credentialed scientist. My participation in the earlier iteration really focused on nutrient loading to the impaired waters of Shinnecock Bay. I will do so again tonight. I would like to speak to the wastewater treatment component. In the first iteration, after, I'll say, some discussions, there was a commitment on part of the applicant to commit to a sewage treatment plant. Certainly I was pushing for highest achievable levels. I will tell you both versions of tonight's presentation, as I understand it, it is individual on-site systems as permitted by Suffolk County. And by way of their codes, you may be following Article 19, which was passed about 6 months or longer ago, looked at trying to upgrade into innovative alternative systems with a benchmark of 19 milligrams treatment. The conventional systems, we're looking at 50 to 60 milligrams treatment. Sewage treatment plants can get down below 10 milligrams, and in many instances down to very low single digits. So I draw your attention to what is being proposed, just to put it in some context. And I know Mr. Voorhees said that it's a very low component of the overall loading. I'll have to look at the loading as it stands, but I will say that we should really raise the bar on whatever development is considered, that sewage treatment is a component of that plan. Ultimately, to try to incorporate a system that does get down to single digits, again, it's raising the bar. It's protecting Shinnecock Bay. It's protecting water quality. So to suggest ultimately that, what Suffolk County will permit, while that is true, there's flaws there. And I will tell you, Suffolk County in their process for Article 6, which was approved in December, ultimately they tied up some loopholes on grandfathering, and you certainly know the issues there. What constitutes a failing system was problematic and concerning to me, because certainly I've been pushing this for years. The requirement for new construction, new development, the requirement for these IA systems was dispensed with. So it is not a requirement. And unfortunately, I don't see it happening anytime soon. So to the extent that this board can leverage highest achievable levels, I urge you to do so. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Who's the next speaker?
Kevin McCrary.
Hi, Board. My name is Kevin McCrary. I'm a resident of East Quogue and a home in the Southampton Pines. I've spoken at previous meetings before with the town board, so I'm kind of reiterating some of the things that I've said there, but I'm going to add a few items. Starting out with Southampton Pines, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. I'm going to provide you with paperwork from right over here, a lot of which shows what I say is if we don't learn the lessons of history, we're bound to repeat them. So what this is showing with specifically Southampton Pines, there was very little enforcement on there, and basically they had free rein to do whatever the hell they wanted. Many of the homes there, including our very next door neighbor, have overcleared that property to the extent of probably 80%. The requirement is, I think, 50%. So also many of the homes don't have the buffer in the front, and plenty of properties have not complied with the regulations on the books. So I don't see there any way possible that this new development would conform to the rules that are on the books, because there's no enforcement, okay? So it seems like I'm listening to the planners for the Titanic here, where they think this thing is going to sail, but they haven't factored in the iceberg. So what I'm going to say is that there was a comment here about something about the true reference was from the Terminator, "I'll be back." They're back. Okay, so here we are, the Terminator, which will affect the environment significantly. Now, specifically with fertigation, as far as I understand it, there's been no mention of the complete containment area for recollection of the sprinkler water system for the golf course. So unless they have that in their plan, you're not going to get, not even close to 50% of the containment and recirculation. So I would say if that's in their plan, show it. Otherwise, how about a chip and putt course of a few holes where they can practice? Give them that, and then they can contain the sprinkler. But I don't think that's in their plan. The whole plan is to sell this whole package on the golf course. These guys are not developers. They are looking for resort developments.
So time.
Okay? So there you have it.
Thank you, Mr.
Here's the
Thank you for
paper.
your comments. Who's the next speaker?
Cynthia
You
McNamara.
can pass them up now if you want. We'll distribute them now. Thank you so much. Next speaker?
Good evening. My name is Cynthia McNamara. I live on Lewis Road adjacent to the proposed PRD. I'm a former member of the East Quogue Board of Education and a current member of the East Quogue CAC. According to the opposition, which you are obviously hearing from tonight, we shouldn't be here. They said that as soon as the PDD was defeated, Discovery would jump ship and leave East Quogue for good, never to be heard from again. Well, the PDD was defeated, and yet here we are. Discovery hasn't jumped ship. They are still here, rightfully wanting to develop their property. They have maintained a presence on Main Street in East Quogue and are still supporting local endeavors. While I'm still reeling from the fact that the scientifically sound PDD that would have benefited our community immensely was defeated, I am happy that at least we are now before a board whose decision will not be tied to campaign funds or political endorsements. There are two proposals before you. I am asking that you approve the golf course plan that preserves the former Parlato property and does not include workforce housing. Workforce housing will be year-round residents, which will be a further drain on fire, EMS, and our schools. Due to the PDD being denied, we are already facing the possibility of 44 year-round residences being built in East Quogue on 33 acres at the head of Weesuck Creek. We don't need any more. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Yasmin Lajardi.
Hi. So, how is this still a thing? Wasn't this voted down? This was just another loophole to try to build a resort. A golf course, clubhouse, pool, tennis courts, and more. They don't care about our environment, our pine barrens, our deteriorating bays. It's all about money. Preserve the land. Turn it into another Quogue Wildlife or Sears Bellows. Leave it for our future generations to enjoy and experience the nature of Long Island. Preservation is the answer, not development. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Geraldine Jack.
I'll also mention this is the first of hearing on this project. If for some reason you should be heard or maybe don't want to speak this evening or have neighbors and friends who are away, there will be additional public hearings on this. Hi, welcome.
My name is Geraldine Jack, and I'm a resident of East Quogue. I'm also the co-chair of the CAC, the East Quogue CAC. I'm speaking on behalf of myself and not the CAC as a whole unit. I'm against the development. I've been presenting on all the other public hearings, and I haven't changed my story. I have several concerns that any development in the area will threaten our aquifer. We do not have the luxury of reservoirs like they do upstate. Therefore, we must be protective of our sole source of water. This PRD would increase, excuse me, the density in our hamlet, traffic, safety issues, and pollution. The air quality will be compromised by the combination of auto exhaust, fertilizers, and pesticides. There is a direct correlation between these factors and the risk of cancer. We don't need any more cancer here on Long Island. We have enough. The public health of our community and well-being of our citizens should be the primary concern of the planning board. While the planned residential development provides the opportunity for new construction, I will acknowledge that, there will be negative impacts on the hamlet. Some families may experience higher taxes associated with the high-end resort development and cost of living increases, causing them to relocate. We could have the gentrification of our hamlet of East Quogue. I've seen the results of that, where big business comes in and buys property and the whole neighborhood gets moved out because they can't afford to live there anymore. And I'd hate to see it happen in our hamlet. So I'm asking, I don't know what the code is, if there is a code about this, but I think you have to take it seriously to deny this application. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Bob DeLuca, and that will be followed by Vicky Greenbaum.
Patty, would you stamp those in?
Good evening, Chairman Finity, members of the board. My name is Bob DeLuca, and I serve as president of Group for the East End. Thank you for the opportunity to speak, and thanks to everyone, both sides here, that have continued to pursue this all along the way. In the 3 minutes I have, I want to really deal just with one threshold issue, and I hope that the board would allow us and others a 30-day comment period, at least at the end of this, for written comments so that we can put in the record what we can't say in front of you. First two footnotes. You know, there's been testimony that the golf course project is something which was recommended in the comprehensive plan, the East Quogue GEIS, which was approved by the town board. But ultimately, that same town board rejected, however they got there, that project was rejected. And so as you look at this project, you need to ask yourself, you know, if the comp plan is adopted by the town board and then the thing which is in the comp plan is subsequently denied by the town board, maybe the review brought them to that decision. So I just bring that up because you're going to hear it over and over. And I think you need to be careful about applying what the town board did to what the East Quogue GEIS recommended. The second issue here is that the issue of mitigation, whether the mitigation is sewage treatment, whether the mitigation is fertigation, all the other mitigation measures that you've heard of, you need to be careful to understand that the State Environmental Quality Review Act allows you, the planning board, the discretion to decide the mitigation that you need based on the potential impacts of the project. So it's not, we have a great project that we'd like to build, and if we get to build it, we're going to give you all of these additional mitigation measures, and if we don't get to build it, you're going to get the bad project that's going to be worse for the environment. You have, under the law, a discretionary role to decide what mitigation measures that you employ. I know that you're soon to hear from Mike Gerard on the issue of SEQR and how it applies to your work here, which I'm very happy about, and I think you should ask him that very question about the level of mitigation that can be required by a board for a discretionary action. Now on to the threshold issue. The threshold issue here is whether or not these two PRDs are acceptable for the board to consider as it goes forward. So how do you figure that out? Well, I went to the code, and you said before that we're really talking about code issues here, right? So take a look at the State Town Law, Section 278, and Southampton Town, Chapter 247. Those are the two underlying laws that authorize a cluster development or a planned residential development. If you take a look at the state law, you'll find very specifically there's only one sole reason why that is allowed, and it says, and you can check it, but here's the quote, to enable and encourage flexibility of design and development of land in a manner as to preserve the natural and scenic qualities of open lands. You're trying to protect open space. And in fact, in the Aquifer Protection Overlay District, that has always been the primary mitigation to protect groundwater, is to reduce the amount of clearing. If you move on and you take a look at the town law, so you go to Chapter 247, which is the open space component to town law that deals with PRDs, you'll basically find something very similar. That particular section of law says that the goal is to preserve the natural and scenic qualities of open lands in order to provide larger areas of open space for both recreational and conservation purposes.
Luke, if you wish additional time, as stated prior, Mr. Amper didn't use the full time allotment of the applicants did, so if you wish perhaps an additional 3 minutes.
Yeah, and I can probably do it in less than that, but I thank you very much for the additional time. So the point being, in order to decide the very next move, you all as a board have to decide whether these planned residential developments, whether I like them or not, is immaterial, whether they conform to the statutory provision that allows you both under state law and town law to look at a PRD. And once you do that, I think if you look at the legislation, you're going to find that the golf course, one of the reasons we don't have golf courses in PRDs is because they're not a secondary amenity like a swimming pool or a tennis court. In fact, they're much more like a second primary use, which maybe you can get under a planned development district, but you can't get under a planned residential development. And it matters, because when you take a look at this proposal, you're going to find that most of the issues that all of us have raised with respect to groundwater quality and habitat protection and clearing, all of those issues relate to more development on a particular piece of land. And I just ask you to seriously consider that. And the final point I would make is that it's unclear from the applicant's testimony this evening whether they're trying to kind of move this along and say there was already a secret process, this was already looked at, so really you just kind of have to move forward with this. I would urge you not to do so, and I think that this is a new action before you, which requires a new secret review. And I think the size, scale, and complexity of this project on its face basically puts you in a position, and a lot of this data may be able to be transferable from what the town board looked at. You need to do your own environmental impact statement here for the specific purpose of making sure the alternatives that are demanded in the impact statement deal with the issues of mitigation so that you can really compare what the applicant's desired alternative is, if you choose to look at that, and what could possibly be done on this project. I mean, looking at it, there are things that you could do like that to reduce the impact in terms of reducing the size of the clearing, in terms of where the location of the affordable housing is. That kind of stuff is all design work, and that comes through the alternatives process, and I'd ask you to take a look at that. And finally, I would just say it's been a long road for everybody. I appreciate the board's interest in hearing from all of us, and I really do hope that you'll give those of us in the community who care about these things a fair shake and carefully incorporate our comments into the future work that you're going to do on this project. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Who's our next speaker, Matt?
Vicky Greenbaum.
Vicky Greenbaum.
I have not seen the application for tonight's meeting, so I prepared my comments based on the limited information I read on the agenda and in the Southampton Press. This is a question of whether an 18-hole golf course is a good or bad thing on 600 acres above the groundwater aquifer and the surface water Shinnecock Bay watershed, rather than a legal question of whether it should be permitted as a residential use based on current zoning. Nitrogen loading and pesticides are serious issues. How can a golf course that was rejected with legally imposed nitrogen and pesticide restrictions as a PDD be approved, even if the developer promises to self-impose restrictions? Please consider the comments of John Bouvier and Julie Lostad explaining their negative town board votes on the Hills PDD on December 5th. I request that their testimony be entered into the record of this meeting. This PRD proposal is similar to the Hills PDD, which did not pass as a supermajority. The Southampton town voters re-elected Julie Lostad with a large number of votes and replaced Stan Glinka, a yes vote on the PDD, with Tommy John Giovanni, who ran voicing his opinion against the Hills PDD. If that vote were taken today, it would fail with a simple majority. The Hills Golf Course was rejected in spite of community benefits promised. There are no community benefits attached to this application. I think approving a golf course should require a very high bar, knowing that the electorate made known their opinion on this matter at the ballot box, compared to the limited number of people here tonight in the middle of February. An approval would also be in contradiction with the opinions of the majority of the town board. Will the property be strictly residential? Will there be commercial businesses, a restaurant, snack bars, or a golf pro shop? Are golf club memberships limited to the residents of the new homes? What about the invitees that were mentioned? If the other proposal to build on 137 lots is approved, requirements should include the most advanced septic systems, strict rules on fertilizers and pesticides, limit clearing, leaving as much of the Pine Barrens untouched as possible. The pool, event lawn, clubhouse, putting lawn, sports courts, sports fields, farm-to-table garden, and greenhouse and kids' forest club
30 seconds.
should be reconsidered due to the fragile ecosystem there. The 13 workforce housing units should be built in a timely fashion as the larger homes are built. If the board chooses to go forward with this application, please schedule another meeting for public comment at a later date when Southampton town residents are not away on a holiday, and make the actual specifics of the application available to us on the town website. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments, Ms. Greenbaum. Who's our next speaker, ma'am?
Larry Penny.
Larry Penny? Is she here? Oh, that'd be great. We'll distribute them. Great, thank you so much. Okay.
Larry Penny.
Larry Penny, you're up for speaking. Oh, this has to be stamped in.
Always nice to see my students over here. Larry Penny, I'm from Noyak. I've been a citizen of Southampton since 1973, taught at Southampton College. My question here is that I was against the golf course. I sat in at the Gobler thing that was arranged by the town supervisor, which compared a subdivision such as this with a golf course and those condominiums, and it turned out that the subdivision, according to Gobler, generated a lot more of the nitrogen projects than the golf course with the condos. I was against the golf course with the condos. I was certainly going to be against the subdivision with the permanent housing. And I do bring up the question, the invitees. I just know I live near 2 golf courses. There are 20 golf courses within 10 miles of, say, the Southampton, the Peconic Canal. There's a lot of golf courses. And also, I have to remind the board that the 5-acre zoning on this property goes back to about 1985, because I remember it fairly well and participated in that talks about the zoning. And 5-acre zoning turns out not to be work anymore in terms of keeping the nitrate levels down and so forth, and along with all the other things. And so consequently, I think this is a plan that's based on an outdated assessment of the zoning, and also come from Mattatuck. You know, this is a nice place. East Quogue is a beautiful place. Why kind of muck it up with this huge, I think the largest of its kind subdivision in Southampton town in many, many years? That's my, and I will generate more remarks in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Penny.
Andrea Spilka.
Good evening. Good evening. I'm Andrea Spilka. I'm president of the Southampton Town Civic Coalition. I represent most of the civics west of the canal and a conduit to the civics pretty much throughout the town. And I do want to say on the record that most of the civics in the town were against the idea of the golf course PDD that Discovery was planning. According to your website, the Planning Board recommends modifications to the town's comprehensive plan that would provide for the improvement of the town, future growth, protection of natural resources, etc. Making an exception to allow a full-yield residential application and a full-yield private golf course as part of a PRD would do none of these things. A golf course in this sensitive location should never be allowed. This location has the most restrictive zoning in the town for a reason. To create the golf course, they will be removing and replacing approximately 350,000 cubic yards of soil and changing the topography of a large portion of the property. In objecting to the proposed golf course, both town board members Julie Lofstad and John Bouvier, as well as the members of the Conservation Board, noted their concerns about the possible contamination of the drinking water, as well as Shinnecock Bay and Weeksuck Creek. They were concerned that the best scientific analyses couldn't offer conclusive results and relied on theories and modeling, and we should be concerned about that too. In addition, the Conservation Board also called for clearing standards above what is required in the Aquifer Protection Overlay District because of the heightened environmental sensitivity of the site. But they also went on to say that the overall residential yield is more likely 74 to 87 units And here we're talking about 118 and a golf course. Allowing two primary uses in a PRD is contrary to the goals of the zoning category, which is designed to make a project more environmentally responsible, and would set a very frightening precedent on this site and throughout the town. Could a tennis center be allowed as a recreational use? What about a rifle range? What about a ski slope like they tried in Riverhead? I'm just finishing. And what about the controls that you would have to put on these properties? Can you make sure that no one else will be profiting from them and that they wouldn't change the dimensions? Landowners do have rights, but so do the residents of Southampton. Your decision in this case will have wide-ranging repercussions throughout the town. The golf course was denied by the town, and we hope you'll deny it as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments.
Elizabeth Jackson.
Elizabeth Jackson.
My name is Elizabeth Jackson. I'm a lifelong resident of East Quogue, and I'm now the co-chair of the East Quogue CAC and have been a member of the East Quogue CAC for over a year. I've been listening. It is a bit confusing when you see the proposal packet, the pre-application, versus the knowing all of that we learned from the PDD process. So hearing now that some things would be included, just like it was, gets to be a bit overwhelming as a public person trying to figure out what we're commenting on. So I liked a lot of what everyone else has been saying, and I don't want to repeat that. My concerns are these. There is an area here. This is steep slopes. That's sand mine was before Pine Barrens. You can see the slopes in here. This is not their ideal plan. And this is their ideal plan with the golf course. Steep slopes here. Golf course, golf course, golf course, recreational uses. You're not supposed to be messing around with steep slopes, especially in Pine Barrens area. It is the head of the aquifer recharge. Oh, sorry, that's what I was trying to avoid. So that's one major concern is how they're going to use their space, but then all of this area, for you to understand, is very steep slopes. Also, there's concerns with total areas that are allowed to be fertilized, percentage fertilization within Pine Barrens areas. Are the houses going to be able to also have recreational spaces for their own private use? Do they get to put their own swimming pools and tennis courts, bocce courts, pickleball, whatever they want per parcel? And another point was down in the out parcels by the golf course on that one. 6, I believe, at least, of those out parcels are actually owned by either Suffolk County as County of Suffolk property or titled as Suffolk County Nature Preserve areas. Also, all of the town parcel along the edge was paid with taxpayer money and is part of the water cleaning, that monies. And the golf course, for all of its recreational use, kind of lines all the way up and down. So we're hoping that what they say is going to be helpful, but I'm concerned that it could contaminate. One other minor detail was there was a Telcom Holdings LLC site plan application. I admit I don't know what the status of it is now, but we had it before East Quogue CAC for comments a couple months ago. That parcel has tax map numbers that lie within this project. And at that point, it was a different owner than it is being said to be now. It would be over in the Parlato land, I think somewhere here.
It's time.
Just curious and making sure that you guys aren't having two things going on at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Michael Marino.
Good evening, Town Board, Planning Board. Thanks for letting us speak. I do have one question. you asked them before if there was any, if they were requesting any special variances.
Correct.
How could you ask them that? It's a question.
There were no variances.
There's no variance. Oh, okay. The current CR 200 zoning is one house per 200,000 square feet. 5% lot coverage, 200-foot minimum lot width, 100-foot minimum front yard, 125-foot combined side yards, 100-foot rear yard minimum. That's for each house. These regulations were in place when Discovery Land bought. Granting special permission, varying from the regulations for a private community golf course, is bad for East Quogue and bad for Southampton. Bad for East Quogue because private community is an oxymoron. Why should you give special permission that promotes exclusion and divisiveness? Bad for Southampton. Think about how our town will be perceived. The town board's will was rendered irrelevant. The town of Southampton will appear corrupt. Can anyone really estimate the future cost Southampton will bear from widespread perception of impropriety? Southampton's main draw is the Atlantic Ocean, period. Another crown jewel is Shinnecock Bay, a major attraction teeming with life. It is understandable that a major attraction draws interest. The Hills property, situated where it is, needs a major attraction to generate interest in the proposed dwellings. The current appropriate zoning has produced no dwellings to date, and if pursued and promoted without the major attraction of a golf course, demand for homes will be weak. There is no doubt that a golf course and a 118 dwellings worth of pesticides, along with 450 toilets upstream from Shinnecock Bay, threatens our own crown jewel, Shinnecock Bay. Not to mention the protection, the proximity to our special aquifer overlay district, the recharge area. As our leaders, our planning board, I respectfully remind you, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Frederick Havemeyer.
Good evening, Fred Havemeyer, Montauk Highway, Bridgehampton. Many of you have known me over the years as a longtime Southampton Town trustee. I'm no longer on that board. I retired a few years ago. But I've still kept up my interest in our waters and the preservation of the waters, both salt and fresh, that we have in Southampton Town. To that note, the trustees are the custodians of 25,000 acres of saltwater bay bottoms and 99 freshwater ponds. And while I served on that board, I was very, very strongly involved in carrying out those duties. This application is a new one for this board, but has been heavily reviewed by the town board and rejected. I spoke at all the town board meetings for the Hills PDD and was present in all of them, of course, and listened to everything. The elephant in the room in this particular situation is putting a golf course high on the list of polluters of all the different uses in an aquifer protection area in the protected Pine Barrens. Ladies and gentlemen, this makes no sense. It just isn't a match. If somebody wants to put a golf course, a developer somewhere, as a money-making way of getting people to buy houses around it, put it in an area that is not an aquifer protection area. What I'm referring to specifically is the known polluters from golf courses: nitrogen, phosphorus, loading of them, herbicides and pesticides. We have Weesuck Creek right next door. Underneath the golf course is a sole source aquifer. This, again, defies common sense. how this application got strung along to your board, and I highly respect your board. Dennis, you know that because we've known each other for years. It's taking something, couldn't get in the front door, so let's try to put it in the side door. I mean, come on, folks. Enough is enough is enough. What we're trying to do in this town, we have overdevelopment thrust upon us, is to protect what's left. And when I'm saying that, I'm not just referring to open space. I'm referring to the integrity of our aquifer, of our waters, of our bays, and those natural environmental assets that we consider and know are the fundamental reason why we want to live here. The Hills RD, I guess the PRD now, is in an area where it's 5 acre zoning for the houses. Fine. Fred Thiel was instrumental, I believe, in doing that years ago. But Fred Thiel is completely against this project. And so is Bridget Fleming, for the obvious reasons, and they've spoken out very clearly on that. I'm against it, and the people over there are against it, and many other people in the town. I'll wind up very quickly. I implore this board, I know many of you personally, I respect you highly, to reject this application on its face because of the very irresponsible situation that is trying to bring to the fore simply to make a lot of money. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Havemeyer.
Ronnie Campsey.
Name's Ronnie Campsey. Been a resident of Southampton Town for over 40 years. And I've seen many changes in those times. But I just wanted to bring up one thing about Mr. Amper over there. I guess, Mr. Amper, I'd like to speak to you a second. At a party that we had at the fund, you were having a Civic Association barbecue, and you came to that in East Quogue. And I asked you if you knew where the sand pit was, and you said, what sand pit? You're worried about the pine barrens and everything, and you don't know where the sand pit is? And I listened to the rest of these people over here.
You have to direct your comments to the board, unfortunately.
Excuse me?
You have to direct your comments to our board. I know.
Okay, thank you. But anyway, I'm just saying, everybody's afraid of the boogeyman. There's a boogeyman every place you look. But you're, as a town board, as the board, you have to review all the things. If this development meets all your criteria, I ask you to vote for it, because they could put 300 more homes on that property, impacting the school system unbelievably, because it could be as many as 600 to 800 kids. The school can't afford what it has now, and those taxpayers wouldn't be paying what the school would need to operate with those additional students. You have a gift horse who come to town here and said they want to do a 7-month-a-year project. That's less impact than 300, 400 homes. And I'm asking you to take a good look at it and think about the working men and women who live here. If they can meet the criteria and meet the water management and everything, vote for it. It's for the people. It's really a moral obligation that is happening here, because they're saying, naysayers are saying this and saying that. I come in more contact in a week probably than most of them come in a year. I speak to those people, and they came in and asked me, what kind of idiots did we have on the town board? I said, what do you mean? Said they had all these things that they met. You said if you do these studies and you meet them, we'll vote for it. And I told the people, I said, I don't know, I told you to come to the town board meetings, and they said, we thought it was a done deal. I said, not a done deal. So if you would like for me to bring in 5,000 signatures or 1,000 signatures just to the people of the town.
30 seconds.
Thank you very much. I know you have a very hard job to do, and thank you for your service.
It's great to see you, Mr. Campson. Thank you.
April Carone.
Hello.
My name is April, and I live right next to East Quogue. I have 3 little children at home, and every day we look around and we see loss of habitat, and it's everywhere you look. It's gone. There's nothing left. Nothing is left. And I ask that Discovery Land, maybe, just once, do something that is right. Pack your bags. Take the town of Southampton's offer and let us be. Let my children have fresh drinking water that we don't have to worry about. As I understand, Governor Cuomo is spending so much money trying to repair the waters that have been affected by nitrogen and fertilizers. So we're spending all this money cleaning our bays, and then we're entering this type of project. 1 home per 5 acres is what the land was originally zoned for. Unfortunately, if we can't preserve it, then that is what we need to do. 1 home per 5 acres. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Ron Cass.
Good evening. My name is Ron Cass. I've been a resident of East Quogue for 20 years. I'm the founder of the Clean organization, and I'm against the Discovery's application to build a golf resort community in the area referred to as the Hills. I read Mr. Bruin's letter of December 26, 2017 in support of Discovery's proposal with great interest. He quotes 5 code sections that, in his interpretation, would allow his clients to build a golf course. That letter, in my opinion, has as much spin as any of those full-page ads from Discovery Land. We all had been told that after 4 years of seeking a PDD, so that his clients could build a golf course in the Pine Barrens, he concluded they could have done it without all the bother, pursuant to current zoning. Let me read some of the sections he quoted. 292-2B5. Provision for such facilities as are desirable adjuncts to the contemplated use, such as parks, recreation areas, school sites, firehouses, fire wells, and off-street parking. Nothing to do with a golf course at all. 277-4, reservation of parkland on subdivision plats containing residential units. A, before the planning board may approve a subdivision plat containing residential units, such subdivision plat shall also show, when required by such board, a park or parks suitably located for playground or other recreational purposes. Nothing to do with a golf course. 292-35B, park requirements in residential plats. This section is about parks that are required by the planning board or the payment of a park fee. Nothing to do with golf courses. 247-9A.
30 seconds.
The planning board may approve recreational use such as wooded park areas, bridle paths, hiking bench areas, etc. Nothing to do with a golf course. 247-7 is titled Conditions for Preservation Property Owners Association. I believe Mr. Bruin is quoting an incorrect section, but maybe not, since this also has nothing to do with a golf course. Nothing in any of these sections remotely suggests the golf course is allowed by the current zoning. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Al Algieri.
Good evening, Mr. Finnerty and town board members and planning board members. My pleasure to be here. I'm here today as the president of the East Quogue Civic Association. The application before you today is basically no different from the PDD application submitted by Discovery Land for its development titled The Hills, and which was voted down and denied by the Southampton Town Board. In this new application, there is still an 18-hole golf course, there is still a clubhouse, there are still 118 plus residents, all to be built over an environmentally sensitive area that will affect East Quogue's drinking water. Moreover, the same harmful pesticides will still be used on the greens, whether public or private, and these pesticides will not dissipate, they will not go away, but the winds will carry them and they will fall on the buildings and grounds of our elementary school, which is very close to the proposed golf course, where our children and grandchildren attend. Remember, there are no safe pesticides, only some less harmful than others, but still harmful. Discovery launched its bid for a PDD to build its mega golf course resort. They have now submitted an application for PRD, Planned Residential District, in its efforts to get their project through. A planned recreation district does not include a full 18-hole golf course or a clubhouse in addition to houses. This is a different application before you from the ones you usually make decisions on. This is about a complete change of the existing zoning, which will affect our drinking water and the air we breathe. In my opinion, this decision should be made by our elected officials on the Southampton Town Board. Remember, this project they propose will only benefit the people that own homes or buy homes there for a recreational area. It will not affect anyone that lives and owns a home in East Quogue. These will all be new residents. I thank you for listening to us tonight, and good luck.
Thank you, Mr. Algier.
Dan Manning.
Good evening. My name is Dan Manning. Myself, my wife, my family have a home on Spinney Road in East Quogue. I received a notice about this hearing, and as I am an adjacent property owner, we, along with many of our neighbors, have been longtime supporters for this sensible development of this property by Discovery Land Company, and still are. This property has been studied for many years. There are specific recommendations in the town's comprehensive plan which recommended a golf course resort for this property, which is now this 118-unit PRD plan. It is also the lowest impact alternative based on all of the adopted environmental studies, from what I understand, and of which you're all very aware of, I'm sure. This board already reviewed the PDD plan and unanimously supported it. This is essentially the same plan, outside of community benefits and outside golf memberships. While some of the board members of the other board seem to be influenced by outside special interest groups and voted against the comprehensive plan, I'm confident that this planning board will support the comprehensive plan, which is the 118-unit PRD plan. We feel fortunate that this is a company who is looking to develop this land. Since taking ownership, I can attest that they have been proven to be a good neighbor to our community. They have showed a willingness to work with the town in many ways and avenues, and they've kept a meaningful way to protect our environment in all their plans. So we would like to see the 118-unit PRD plan with the golf course, which we are sure will meet all of the relevant codes and requirements of this town. In closing, I would like to commend this board for their due diligence in reviewing and approving the prior PDD plan of the Hills. In doing so, you proved you were above the politics and outside influences that led to the hills being voted down, despite the many seals of approval given to it by many experts like yourselves in their respective fields. We are hopeful that your continued due diligence in the following law on the task before you will lead you once again to your approval of this project. I again ask you to approve this plan for the good of our community of East Quogue, and especially all the young families whose future could well depend on it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ann Algieri.
Good evening, Mr. Finnerty and members of the Planning Board. My name is Ann Algieri, and I'm here as a resident of East Quogue. Under the Planned Development District law, now eliminated, the Town Board was empowered to grant special zoning to allow uses that would otherwise not be permitted under existing zoning. And in evaluating whether the requested special zoning was warranted, the Town Board was given wide discretion in evaluating our proposal. On December 5th, 2017, the Southampton Town Board rejected Discovery Land's request for the PDD titled The Hills in East Quogue. Now, Discovery Land has resubmitted its application, calling it a revised plan and pitching it as a planned residential development, or PRD, with a new name, Lewis Road PRD. However, the only change in Discovery Land's application for a PDD and its present application for a PRD is that the 18-hole golf course, clubhouse, and all the other so-called amenities listed in its application will be open only to residents of this development and not to outside members. Why? They can now try to have it come under the recreational use portion of the PRD law and claim that they need no zoning changes. This is not the intention, in my opinion, of that portion of the law, nor do any of the precedents cited by Mr. Bruin, attorney for Discovery Land, support his claims. It is stretching the interpretation of the law beyond recognition and violating its intent. Now, as Mr. Finnerty pointed out, the process is different when we're dealing with the Planning Board. He has stated that the Planning Board has to put more emphasis on the underlying zoning for the property and the stringent state environmental quality review process, SECRA. Please keep in mind that this area is located in one of the most environmentally sensitive areas on the East End and was upzoned to 5-acre zona to protect our drinking and surface waters, not just because of the impact on the school population. It is not an appropriate place for an 18-hole golf course. Discovery Land has also put forward a second proposal. Please keep in mind with both proposals
30 seconds.
that Pine Barren credits are not supposed to cross school lines, and if they do, they can only do so by a supermajority vote of the Town Board. This is also not an appropriate area for giving a developer a bonus of increased development rights under the guise of affordable or workforce housing. East Quogue is already full of both. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Algieri.
Larry Oxman.
Good evening. I'm Larry Oxman. I believe in transparency, so let me just tell you a little bit of who I am. I don't think always speakers give you that benefit. I'm a real estate broker. I do a lot of land out here. I've represented Carolyn Parlato. Carolyn sold some of the property to Discovery. I've helped them acquire some property. So I come to you with that mindset. It was very refreshing to hear Chairperson to talk about what the role of the Planning Board is, because I don't know if everyone understands that. It was also equally refreshing to hear questions coming from you. I thought they were very good questions. you're right. This is the first of several public hearings. This is going to go for a while. The history of this property started in 2005. I had brown hair. My kids were in second grade. They're now in college. So it's been a very long history. What I really want to conclude with is Discovery themselves. I've found them personally to be a company of real integrity. I was really impressed with, in the previous public hearings, that the mayor of West Hampton Beach and some of the trustees spoke out in favor of working with Discovery. As you know, or may know, that they did the dune deck in the village of West Hampton Beach. And I think that that really goes, says volumes about who you're dealing with. I just want to leave off with, I'm very glad that there are no more politics, and you'll do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Bill Kearns.
Good evening, Board. William Kearns, 27-year resident of Spinney Road, former president of the East Quogue Board of Education. I've been following this project since day one, and I'm opposed to it. And I guess the question, and I don't expect an answer tonight, is why didn't they come to you first? It seems to me that the way it was presented tonight, it's fairly cut and dry that they're entitled to what they're asking for with this golf course development. So why weren't they here first? Why did they drag us through 3, 4, 5 years, 6 4-hour, 7 4-hour public hearings where hundreds of people spoke? I think it's because they lost. And this is their last-ditch effort to bring this project forward. I listened to their people tonight talk about the fact that an 18-hole golf course is much like what you folks have approved in the past with putting greens and small chipping greens and other what they call golf courses on private property in the town. I don't think it's the same thing. I think this is a commercial entity. This will have a liquor license. This will be making money. The people that can afford these large golf areas in their homes are just inviting friends. This isn't the case here. This is a commercial entity. I think also you're potentially setting a dangerous precedent because if someone has a basketball court in their backyard and someone has a large piece of property, using their logic, you can, as a planning board, can allow these people to build a large gymnasium on their property for a couple of thousand people, a couple of thousand of their friends. The same thing with a tennis court. They can build a tennis center. The same thing with a swimming pool. They can build an aquatic center. I think that it's important that we realize that this project has been soundly rejected after many years of deliberation. And I think it's time to close it down. I also take exception, and I find it particularly irksome, that this project is constantly compared to Golf at the Bridge and Sabonic. Between them, Golf and the Bridge and Sabonic do not have 118 homes. So they can't be mentioned in the same breath. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
David Creo. Is there a David here that would like to speak? No. Apologies.
My name's Dave Seeley.
Well, we got a Dave.
Well, handwriting. I don't have the nicest handwriting. So I'm a 43-year resident of East Quogue, basically my entire life. I'm also a member of the current CAC. Just want to make something perfectly clear that the CAC of East Quogue hasn't made a position on this application. We haven't had a chance to review it in its entirety. I'm also here as a resident, or I am here as a resident, not as a member of the CAC, I should say. As a resident, I want to see the largest, most expensive homes built that we could possibly get, because that will help us offset our taxes. We don't need any more small homes. We don't need any more people who use the services that we provide. We need more people to pay the bills. On top of which, I think that they've done a great job and a great service to East Quogue by doing as much research as they have. We've heard a lot of testimony. Now, before you is a project that is going to be largely based upon code and not our wants and wishes. Unfortunately, the time to make a deal passed with the PDD, and I think that was a mistake. That's all I have to say. Appreciate your time.
Thank you for your comments.
That's all I have, Dennis.
Excuse me?
That's it.
That's it on the speakers? Is there anyone who did not print their name in and wishes to be heard? As I mentioned before, this is the first of what will be several public hearings. And in addition, it's our intent to keep the written record open for at least 30 days. So, Mr. Bruin, did you wish to make any closing comments?
Number one, I want to thank everybody for their continuing interest in the application and providing all the comments. Certainly, there are things that we all need to learn further on this application. I just have one point, is our clients did understand what we could do or not do under the code when we first investigated this. But again, all good zoning, all good planning actions are done in accordance with the comprehensive plan. It is the town's comprehensive plan that directed the applicant to seek the planned development district. So that's number one. Number two is there is a significant difference in the business model. If you're familiar with, this is not a commercial enterprise now proposed. There was a commercial enterprise that was proposed. The golf course could be a standalone entity with its entire membership, whether it was supported by the residents or not. That was the application that was sought as a PDD before the town board. Your code currently wouldn't allow that. We can only have a recreational use, a customary accessory residential use, adjunct to, using the language out of the code, adjunct to and only for the benefit of the owners of the lots. Our client this is not the best alternative for our client, but they're still willing to invest in the property. They've been willing to invest in this community, have invested into this community. They're a part of this community. They're not going away. And we believe, as has been submitted in the record, you heard tonight from parties for and against, this is a project that we believe is designed to benefit the community and protect the environment at the same time. So we look forward to getting all the planning board's comments and your input and advice as to pre-application report, and so we can prepare the necessary preliminary application to answer a lot of the questions. Thank you.
And I'd like to certainly thank the residents of East Quogue for maintaining decorum. It's truly a gem of a little hamlet. I don't know how many people, my board members regularly visit East Quogue, but I'm there almost every day, and I have to tell you, vibrant fire department, quintessential downtown Main Street. I make it a point to when I'm barreling through visiting sites, to stop at Michael's Deli, and they used to have dollar coffee after 12, but that's no longer the case. But I have to thank you all for maintaining decorum and showing interest in this project. I can tell you this is the beginning of a very extensive review, and it will be viewed by not just planners, but conservationists, scientists, hydrologists, traffic engineers. So this is going to get the highest level of scrutiny of any project we've reviewed. At that point, I'd like to keep the written comment over for 30 days. I know a lot of people are away. It's a holiday week, and we hope you encourage neighbors and friends to submit letters. All letters and emails are written, are read by the board. Even the repetitive letters we receive, we make a point to read them and note them. Many people put their addresses on there as well, which is helpful. So I'll entertain a motion to close the hearing with a 30-day written comment period.
Motion.
Motion by Phil.
Second.
Second by Gloria. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? We have 6 yes and 1 absent. Thank you very much. And good evening.